Good day, everybody. We're on to day 20 of the KWM 2022 whiskey calendar. This is the 80% of the way there, Mark, because we've always got our day 25 Christmas bottling on the top. I'm thrilled, as always, to be joined by our good friend Dave Worthington from That Boutique-y Whisky Company. Dave, we've got an Inchfad to talk about today, which is not something people are probably familiar with.
No, you don't see an awful lot of Inchfad. I mean, we've got an Inchfad label. It's called Inchfad on this label here. Yeah, this is one of the single malts that's produced at the really versatile Loch Lomond distillery. I was trying to work out how many sort of styles of whiskey. It's something like 14 different styles of whiskey that they can produce there. And I have been there and I have tasted lots of different variations of their malts at the distillery, or their new make spirits, and they are very, very different. So yeah, they've got a collection of different pot stills, unique pot stills, and producing whiskey that's typically lightly floral and grassy. So the original distillery had a set of pot stills with rectifying plates in, also known as Lomond stills, and it allows those sort of different flavor streams to be produced there. They added a second pair of stills, the same design being installed in 1990 when they expanded, and they also put some continuous stills there a little bit later to make their own grain whiskey. And they've also got two traditional swan neck pot stills, and they were added sometime just before the year 2000. Before an additional continuous still set up to make grain whiskey from 100% malted barley. So they've got an old coffee still in there as well. It's a fascinating distillery if you can get a tour in there.
It is a crazy place, Dave. I can vouch. I mean, it doesn't look like any other distillery in Scotland. Evan and I had the privilege of touring it Sean and I had the privilege of touring it in the fall. And I don't know what I was going to expect, because I have a soft spot for some of the whiskey coming out of there. I think it's been underappreciated for a long time. You know, it was a whiskey that was kind of marketed for most of the 2000s as a, bottom shelf blend or like really entry level single malt. But I think they've really kicked up their game, and it's truly fascinating to go in there and see all these different stills they have. And when you can actually physically see that, it makes it easier to appreciate how they're able to create such a complex and unique spirit, because they've got more tools at their disposal than almost any other distillery in Scotland.
They have indeed, yeah. They really have turned this distillery around. The new owners have come in and they really have given it a lot of love and attention. I've got some great people in there, great team, and they're making some really good spirits now. I mean, it is a unique distillery in Scotland, as it is both a malt and a grain distillery, really set up by its former owner to be Scotland's self-sufficient distillery, rather than playing that normal game that everybody else does of exchanging the spirit you make for fillings of grain or malt for your own blends. It was designed to make all of the requirements itself. It does make a lot of different styles of whiskey, Inchfad, and we've got the Inchmoans and the Inchmoans and the Loch Lomons, and there's a few other ones as well, which I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, Rochedew is one of the ones that, interestingly, if you go back to the 90s, was being casked as single malt, because it was pot still going through single malt spirit going through a pot or a column still. But I guess the SWA changed the rules on them. So now Rochedew gets classified as a grain, even though it's made from malted barley and often is peated as well. So yeah, it's a pretty fascinating place. I think you're bang on. I was thinking the same thing. They make about 14 different styles of whiskey in-house, but they're also the only distillery currently operating that can produce a single grain, or a single blend rather. They can blend their own malt and grains together to create a blended Scotch whiskey that is a single blend. And there were others in the past that could do this, but certainly not at the moment.
Not anymore, no. Now, from my understanding, Inchfad is supposed to be one of the heavily peated malts. Now, this might be a heavily peated malt because it might be a much finer cut, like an elegant cut. And we've had this with our Millstone, which I know is 55 ppm in the malt, but you would never guess it in tasting it. It doesn't until it comes through a little bit later. So ordinarily, Inchfad is at the high end of the malted, of the peated malt, but this really doesn't come across immediately. And I might need to speak to Mr. Henry about this, but it's there in the background. But ordinarily, I'd expected Inchfad to be up there with their Croft and Gear, for example. And Croft and Gear, you really do notice with the peat. And this is supposed to be a heavily peated, but it might be that they've taken such a fine cut that.
Well, Dave, we kind of pre-tasted this one because we wanted to be sure it was what we thought it was supposed to be. And while the peat is still very light and not as in your face on the nose, I think it has really started to creep up on the palate, especially towards the finish. Like you're getting a malt that seems to have a phenol level somewhere in the range of like a long row or an Ardbeg, though without that coastal medicinal maritime element.
No, it is what I'll say elegant rather than that slap of peat. It's lots of soft fruit and sort of malty notes, and that it is a hint of smoke that's really coming through there.
Well, to me, it reminds me of back in the day, like going back before Scotland's drink driving laws got very strict, and not without good reason. But back in the day when you could have porridge in Scotland and ask for a little bit of whiskey to put on there to add some flavor to it, and this kind of has that intense maltiness, but with this little bit of smoke coming through and sweetness, as though I just drizzled a little bit onto my oatmeal.
Well, in this house, a drop of whiskey in your porridge is normal. Every morning this time of year, I always have a wee splash, just a dessert spoonful of whiskey. And I must admit, I really do love a bit of peat in the whiskey, because that smell of that peat hitting the hot milk, the hot oats, it's just delicious. I love that smell in the morning.
Dave, I don't know if you've ever tried this, but have you ever had the privilege of having buns made from peated malt or with some peated malt in them before?
I haven't, no.
I only bring this up because I think this I know you love to make bread, and so I think this might be something you need to look into. But back in the day at Glenmorangie House up near Tame, they used to serve Ardbeg buns, buns made with some peated Ardbeg malt mixed into the grain bill for the bread. And those things out of the oven with a little bit of butter on them, oh my God, you'd be in heaven.
Wow. Yes, I do need to try. I don't know where I'd put that in, but I've got to make.
You're gonna have to get a little bit of like peated flour from some friends in the whiskey industry, so that you can make your own peated rolls, peated dinner rolls, Dave.
Okay, get some. I see what you're saying. You actually get some peated malt and get it ground down to add into the.
Preferably milled, so that you can then just sift out the flour, get rid of the husk. And
I was just going to add a couple of drams of whiskey instead of water.
That might work too. That might work too. Back to the Inchfad. These whiskeys are always, I think people are always confused by them, because as we've discussed, this is one of a number of spirits made by Loch Lomond, but they don't know what an Inchfad is. That Inchfad doesn't equate to a distillery. It's hard for people to wrap their heads around it. It's not a spirit we see often, but this is a lovely whiskey. It's got some nice peat on it. It's got this like strawberry Twizzlers waxiness to it.
I'm really enjoying this, I must admit. I know I had a little sip earlier as I was talking about it, because I was expecting it to be a little bit peatier than this, but this is really lovely, I must admit.
Towards the back of the palate, that peat's really coming up. It's getting a bit tarry. Now this is batch 1, according to the bottle.
Yes, we don't get a lot. We don't get a lot, and we've used the same label as our Loch Lomond, as our Inchmurren, as our Croft and Gear. So we've used this label 4 times with just little splashes of color, and we've changed what the wizard's saying. Why the wizard is we don't believe that Loch Lomond create all this magic with their different stills. We said we've gone for the full core, and it's magic. There's wizardry going on in this distillery rather than the stills. Although we've got the stills in the background there, you can see a little pot still with a column on it, and you can see the traditional stills in the background. I think there was a coffee still in the background as well. But yeah, every one of our Loch Lomond distillery labels look kind of similar, but the colors change. And what the wizard's saying, there's little changes between each of them, but it's basically the same label because it's from the same distillery.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the label sums it up pretty well: malt, peat, and fruit. And I think that's what we're getting on this. It's a lovely, lovely dram. And
yeah, I'm really impressed with this. That's really lovely.
A nice winter night's dram. I don't know, December 20th. Are we in winter yet? Have we passed? I think we are.
In this house, we're allowed to put certainly when the kids were younger, we're allowed to put the distillery, we're allowed to put the Christmas decorations up from today. From tomorrow, because today is my daughter's birthday. And we were never allowed to celebrate. I didn't think it was ever fair that they should have the Christmas. I wanted her to celebrate her birthday and then Christmas afterwards. So we made the complete cutoff. We wouldn't talk about Christmas at all. There wouldn't be tinsel around my hat or Christmas jumpers on. We'd do the decorations on the 21st after her birthday.
Well, Dave, I think that's maybe a good spot to end off today. We'll raise a glass to your daughter's birthday, to the Christmas decorations going up tomorrow. So Slange, cheers, and happy birthday.
Happy holidays.
Till next time, Dave, I think we've got one more.
Oh, how exciting.
Stay tuned.